About a week ago, I joined a Facebook group called the Social Anxiety Support Group. As most of you know, for most of my life, I had struggled quite severely with social anxiety. I was comfortable enough in a one on one situation, but I was very, very uncomfortable in group situations, parties, or any situation where I was in the limelight. I imagined terrible things happening. So, yesterday I did a live stream sharing my own life experiences, what it was like for me to be socially anxious, what I learned about psychology, and what I learned about how my brain works, and why I was feeling so much anxiety, and then how I corrected that problem. Essentially, how I learned to enjoy social situations, enjoy the randomness and uncertainty that comes with connecting with people. I wanted to share that here. A number of the members of the group had requested that I share it in a way that they can share with their friends. And I thought I would put it on my blog, as this is something that most of us have dealt with to some degree at some point in our lives, or we know someone who's struggling with this. So there's a lot of information here, but I hope it's something that you'll find useful. I just wanted to share some thoughts. I've been reading through this group, which has been really, really great. It represents for me most of my life, most of the challenges that I've faced for most of my life in terms of being deeply, deeply socially anxious. I grew up quite an isolated kid and had one or two friends through high school, never dated until university, that kind of thing. And then for most of my life, all the way up until my 40s, I was still quite socially anxious. I could function socially, but I wasn't comfortable. I would avoid parties. I would really, really avoid things like going on stage or public speaking. Those things scared me more than anything. Doing a live video on Facebook was unthinkable. And a lot's changed for me. And the reason it's changed for me is that I got sick of it. I got sick of it and I decided to try to understand what my brain was doing and where the anxiety was coming from. And I've learned a lot. And I wanted to share a few notes that might help some of you. So help through your own process of designing the life that you want. Because I'm really happy with my life now. The thing that I've learned, I always imagined that people out there are complicated, that they don't have my best interests in mind, that it's a lot of work to keep people happy, that at some point I'll be disappointed or hurt or rejected, and that overall it was just safer to stay home and kind of be in my own bubble and do my own thing. That felt more comfortable and secure. But what I've actually discovered is that having people in my life has added so much. My world is 10 times happier with other people than without. And I never would have believed that until I actually experienced it. Many of you probably know the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. When I was in high school, I took that test as a junior in high school, I think. I grew up in the U.S., spent most of my life in the U.S. I happen to be in New Zealand now. Did some traveling, which was part of my process of tackling my social anxiety, get out there and deal with the unknown, kind of confront it, right? Which was really good. But my Myers-Briggs, my MBTI was INTJ, which basically means introverted. And I was very deeply introverted. I really avoided social situations whenever possible, particularly when there was more than, say, one or two other people. I immediately became uncomfortable. And part of it was this complication. How do I keep three people happy? How do I keep three complications going? Oh my God, four, that's way too many. Going to a party and I'd just be in the corner, a bit panicked, right? It was, I'm sure you guys can relate to these feelings and how your brain's reacting to these situations and trying to solve problems that actually don't exist, right? But your brain's convinced that they do. So that was my life. And then after I began learning a bit of psychology and began challenging myself and pursuing my own happiness, creating a world that's fit me better, things changed a lot. And I happened to take the MBTI Myers-Briggs examination again about 3-4 years ago, which was about 2 years after I really started challenging myself in terms of understanding psychology, understanding what's happening in my head. And I came up as a different classification. I came up as ENTP, very different, which is extroverted, which is very, very strange to me to hear because I don't think of myself as extroverted. But a lot of people that meet me, I actually do a lot of psychology coaching now, people that I happen to work with who happen to be socially anxious don't believe that I used to be socially anxious, which is really funny. I think because I'm so much more comfortable with my emotions now. But that's actually the first place I wanted to start. Is one of the biggest things that helped me was understanding the structure of the mind, because I always felt this huge argument going on inside my head. Part of me wants to connect to people. Part of me is saying, hell no, you're going to die. Something really bad's going to happen here. And there is a model known as the triune brain. And the triune brain model is essentially a model of the brain looking at it from an evolutionary perspective as 3 separate layers of the brain, an inside, a middle layer, and an outer layer. And the oldest part of the brain we would refer to as the reptilian brain. It is only concerned with your survival and the survival of the species, which means reproduction. So its job is to keep you alive. It's where you feel fear, fight, flight, freeze, threat response. That's basically all it does. Its job is to keep you alive and perpetuate the species. So you're either hungry or scared or horny. There's not a wide range of emotions there, right? And that began, so reptiles came about 320 million years ago. And I actually think that those key attributes, survival of the individual and survival of the species, must have existed ever since life first began. Ever since the first bacteria began, there had to be that idea of don't die and perpetuate the species. Otherwise, life would have just created and died, right? Somehow it perpetuated. So even long before reptiles. But reptiles, 320 million years ago, then about 250 million years ago, for some reason, evolution pushed us in a direction where there needed to be a lot of adaptation much faster. Reptiles couldn't adapt quickly. They couldn't deal with new problems. They didn't have the ability to learn. And they were very solitary. They didn't even form families. They'd lay eggs and walk away, right? So mammals came along. Mammals were evolved from reptiles about 250 million years ago. And 250 million years ago, what changed was, first of all, the design of our brain favored social groups. We wanted to be in social groups. One of the chemicals that came into play there was serotonin. Serotonin is the chemical in your brain. When you feel happy and healthy and successful, it's high. When you feel depressed and low, serotonin is low. And this is why, antidepressants like serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and SSRIs, and other types of drugs affect your mood in a very direct way through the manipulation of serotonin quite commonly. And understanding that you are wired, the mammal part of the brain is wired to desire social connection, is why social anxiety becomes a problem. If you didn't care about being alone and you were happy with that, you would just be happy with that, right? But we struggle with this. We're wired to be connected. We're wired to be in a group because Mother Nature realized that there was strength in numbers. You could protect food better. You could get food better. A pack of humans could take down a mammoth, but one human would be eating mice, right? And this is true for all mammals. That's why pack behavior and tribal behavior and pack hierarchies and all these different things exist, as well as family structures. So the second chemical that mammals seemed to really bring onto the scene was oxytocin, which is the feeling of love, which is a great feeling between parents and children, between two lovers, partners. That creates, it's referred to as the pair bonding chemical. So our mammal brain is able to learn better. It's able to adapt better and evolve better to the conditions, to the challenges of this generation, because you can learn from the time you're born, you're a blank slate, and then you learn. But one of the biggest differences was that desire for social connection, and that is huge, and that is part of all of us. So 250 million years ago, and about 50,000 years ago, very recently by comparison, modern human behavior emerged, and it's thought that that's really the starting point of the modern human mind. 50,000 years, nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. If you were to draw these on a timeline, 320 million years, 250 million years, and then 50,000 years is like nothing. And that's very important to recognize. What the human brain brought along was abstract thought and the ability to imagine the future. And it's very, very powerful, the ability to imagine the future. But it's also very, very challenging if you don't control it, right? So we're very good at imagining worst case scenarios, and they scare the bejesus out of us, right? That's what anxiety is. You're imagining something that doesn't exist, that isn't currently threatening you. You're not actually fearful of something that's presently a risk in your life, but it sure feels like a risk. You can sure imagine that as clearly as day, and you can emotionally react to that. And this was the key thing that I learned. Those three brains, we'll call them the reptile, the mammal, and the human brain, they're all separate. And they're all running at the same time, all the time, concurrently. And they all have a different opinion about the same thing that you're looking at. It's like having three voices in your head that all give a different evaluation. So for me in my socially anxious state, my mammal brain wanted to connect, but did not want to get rejected. It feared rejection. My human mind could easily imagine all these possible things going wrong. It was very creative at imagining where things could go off the rails, particularly in human interactions where it's so hard to predict, right? You don't know who this person is. You don't know who these people are. And yet you're very, very emotionally affected by things like rejection. So you could imagine all kinds of terrible things. And then you began reacting to them as though they're real. Pretty soon, reptile brain steps in and says, this sounds like a life or death situation, and I'm in a cold sweat, and I'm panicked, and I'm not going outside. And this was essentially the state. And understanding that those parts of the brain are all doing exactly what they're designed to do, but that I have them out of balance. The way I have them out of balance is that my human mind is very well trained. Our school systems focus on training our human mind. Mathematics, science, English, literature, chemistry, engineering. We're never really taught how to use our mammal mind or our reptilian mind. But they make up the biggest part of our brain from an evolutionary standpoint. They are the most central, and they are, the reptile and the mammal are basically our emotional brain together. So we don't know how to deal with our emotions. And in modern schools, growing up in America, I was taught thoughts are great. You should be able to solve everything rationally. Emotions are kind of useless. Just kind of ignore them. But of course you can't. That's an enormous part of your brain, and it pretty much is most of your subconscious. And so there are problems you can't rationally predict. And so what happens is you just feel abject terror over the terrible things that you can imagine happening, because no one showed me how these parts of my brain work together. I just kept trying to solve problems rationally. And this is where things go off the rails socially. People are very unpredictable. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's what makes life so fun. If you could predict everything that was going to happen in your life, it'd be pretty dry, it'd be pretty boring. You might feel safe, but you'd be bored to death. And this is one of the best things about humans that I realized, is that unpredictability is what makes relationships fun. It's what makes having friends fun. It's what makes being social fun. And it's well worth pursuing it. But you have to manage those different aspects of your brain. You have to be able to recognize when you are overthinking things, when you are imagining worst case scenarios for no useful reason. These are not scenarios you've ever experienced. These are not scenarios that anyone you know has ever experienced, yet we'll sit there and think through every possible terrible thing that could possibly happen and feel like it's a real threat. What I learned to do is to turn that off. I turned it off simply by, I can't turn off parts of my mind really, but I can direct my attention. What I would do is I would direct my attention to how I'm feeling. How am I actually feeling right now? I walk into a cafe. I want to learn to be more social. I want to get over this anxious feeling. And what I would do is turn my attention, instead of to, here's the million things that can go wrong, I would turn my attention to, how's my breathing? How am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm a little nervous, but I'm okay. I'm not being hurt. There's nothing terribly threatening right here. No rabid dogs or mountain lions or saber-tooths or anything. I'm actually okay. I'll just focus on that and let things happen. Gradually, as I began to turn my attention more towards my reptilian brain and my mammal brain, rather than creating all these terrible things and playing these movies to them, these horror movies that would just amp them up and freak them out, I was able to feel comfortable in social situations. And I started very small. My practice would be, this is referred to as exposure therapy. Many of you know that term in psychology. It basically means giving yourself small doses of that thing that creates the anxiety for you. What I would do is I'd just walk down the street and make eye contact when I could. Sometimes people would return it, and then I'd try to hold it for a second or longer than was comfortable for me. And then I'd keep doing that. And then later I'd be making eye contact and smile, and then make eye contact and hey, or good day, or something. And then pretty soon I was talking to baristas in cafes and store clerks and homeless people and old people at the bus stop. And then before long, it became pretty easy to walk up to someone in a cafe and say, hey, I'm Mike. I haven't met you before. How's your day going? And just start conversations. I realized that none of the things I used to imagine that were going to kill me were actually a threat, but I was really, really good at creatively creating those. So the first thing I want you to really recognize is that there's nothing wrong with you. The parts of your brain are all behaving exactly the way that they're supposed to behave. The reason I think this is very important is the moment you think there's something wrong with you, you assume that you're an exception and that there's something malfunctioning that needs fixed. There isn't anything that needs fixed. It's really no different from if I was trying to, if I was laying on the ground and I wanted to get up, but I didn't know how to use my legs. The only thing I knew how to use was like my fingers and my neck. I'm gonna have a really hard time standing upright. I was just using the wrong muscles for the wrong things. In the same way, socially, your rational mind is great at, solving crazy problems like how do we get humans to the moon. It is not very useful in building social connections. And if you doubt that, look at a dog. Look at the way dogs connect. Two dogs walk down the street, they immediately like each other or they don't like each other. They immediately connect, they sniff each other, and they're best friends. Look at the way two kids connect. I remember when I was a kid and I would see another kid who's about my age, and I'm maybe 3 years old. I would get so excited. It's my new best friend, right? I don't know who this kid is. I've never seen them before. I'll probably never see them again. But right now, this is my new best friend. Something happened, right? Where as we began to develop our cognitive sense, we began to use it for things that it is not that useful for. And it just creates problems for us. Anyway, I wanted to share these thoughts because it was so meaningful to me. I thought I'd just drop a note here. And what I'd encourage you to do is make it a daily practice to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable socially. And all you want to do is watch your emotions. Every day, just go out, make eye contact, text someone you haven't texted in a long time, share something with somebody, do a Facebook Live video, whatever creates that emotional reaction, and then just breathe through it, let that emotional reaction happen. What you'll find is that all those things that you're so good at imagining as risks are just imagination. and that you actually can control the way that your mind does that simply by focusing your attention on something else. I really like using my breath and how I feel in my body. Right now, my body feels fine and safe. I'm just sitting at home. I know I'm live, and I know there are probably people watching me. I don't know. But I don't feel exposed. I don't feel at risk. I don't feel panic rising. I just feel breathing, and talking, and very, very comfortable things. So I highly encourage that. If you want to amp up the challenge a bit, I like to use a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, this is very easy to do right now. I feel very safe doing this today. 10 is, this feels absolutely impossible right now. And then day by day, I would feel, how do I feel today? I want to go practice socially. Okay, I'm a 3. I'm going to say hi to people at the bus stop, but I'm not going to expect any response back. I'm just going to keep walking. That's a 3, right? 10 is walk up, introduce myself, invite someone to a great conversation, or invite them out to coffee or whatever, or go on stage. Now, for me, I don't really feel social anxiety anymore. I'm kind of past the fear reaction. And now I find myself pushing myself a little bit further in terms of trying to get more comfortable speaking on the spot, just coming up with ideas and letting words flow. So I joined Toastmasters recently as a means of doing that. But I find I actually feel surprisingly comfortable in front of the group, which is such an exciting thing. Another thing that helped me a lot was I joined a performing arts group a few years ago, in which we did performance on stage. No talking. It was a Japanese drumming group, and there's always a group of us on stage, like 10 of us, so I'm never out there by myself. That was how it started anyway. And then it took off. I ended up starting my own group, and then I ended up performing quite a bit. And just that exposure to that discomfort, pretty soon you're like, I'm totally safe here, and I had so much fun. I met a new person. You feel your serotonin skyrocket. When you challenge yourself, when you practice courage, anything that scares you, you feel confronted by something that scares you, and you move forward through it anyway. My understanding from my own experience is that your serotonin gets a nice kick up because you just feel on top of the world. Same feeling as if you got a standing ovation, or same feeling if you just won, the Rugby World Cup or the Super Bowl or whatever. You just win some award. There's that incredible sense of I'm on top of the world. That's serotonin. And you can give yourself that simply by challenging yourself a little bit each time. You'll be very surprised at how quickly you can improve your own mood simply by doing something that was a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit difficult. And you'll feel very I want to give myself a pat on the back. I feel so happy about that. Anyway, I know most of us are in COVID-induced isolation. Socializing is a little bit challenging. For some of us, it's nearly impossible. I would encourage you to keep doing it anyway. Don't use the isolation as an excuse to stay isolated. Instead, do a Facebook Live. Go find a small group. Start a small group. Put 10 friends in it from the social anxiety group, and have a practice where you do these lives. Or use something like Zoom to do video chats with 2 or 3 friends, just so you're in that slightly uncomfortable, I feel exposed space. Write something and publish it. Do a YouTube video, make a channel. You can probably still go out. If you can go out, you can still make eye contact and smile at strangers. You don't have to sit down and have conversations if that feels risky or inappropriate due to the virus situation. But get out, do something, challenge yourself, find a way to challenge yourself. You're all obviously very, very good at thinking, or you wouldn't have problems with overthinking. So use that to create situations where you can grow. Anyway, I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that this helps inspire some of you to take some next steps and challenge yourself towards something fun.